UNSTUCK in Time, Memoir of a Time Traveler by Carole. In this episode, we'll look at Chapter 4, I Remember Marco Antonio. Backstory. Contrary to popular belief in some movie scenarios, most past life memories are of ordinary people, but that was not the case with memories of Marco Antonio de Damianius. He was a force to be reckoned with. In fact, I was hesitant to publicly share my memories about past lives, and Marco Antonio had more to do with that feeling than I realized. A spontaneous memory in 1992 brought up the image of a man in a red robe. I knew his name was Marco Antonio, but I did not know his last name. I suspected Marco Antonio was a common name. However, the red velvet robe and the way he carried himself showed me he was not a common man. More memories came in snippets, like previews of coming attractions that flashed across the screen as I watched another program. A scene in the dusty stacks of the secret archives of the Vatican, the sound of vespers echoing along the colonnade, fingering a rosary, looking up at the moon through a telescope in awe of Galileo's genius, crying out to the way-shower for guidance. Then, interactions with my colleagues in two different design studios triggered the memories of love-hate relationships with fellow priests and politicians in both the Catholic and Anglican churches. I recorded these scenes as if I were placing similar colors of puzzle pieces on a board, hoping to find the exact location where they fit into the puzzle, and then I let them go until more pieces appeared. It took years for the pieces to come together, but unlike Marco Antonio, I was both patient and persistent. A walk on the beach soothed my uneasy feelings whenever past life memories interfered with my focus on work and life. The gentle breeze from the Gulf of Mexico and the waves lapping on the shore exposed coquina shells. It was hypnotic. A doodle in the sand turned into a name, de Damianius. That is strange, I thought. I filed it away in my memory without a clue to where it went, just a knowing that I needed to remember it. And then the day came when I put it together. Sitting in the Catholic church at a friend's funeral, a deep rage began to churn inside me. My friend was the father of young children who were my daughter's age. His loss seemed so unfair. My rage grew until I could release it with a primal scream inside my car after the funeral. Something shifted. A stillness came over me, and I heard a gentle voice say, "Go to the library." I remember the peaceful feeling when I had heard the gentle voice from my childhood, and other moments when I had felt alone. It had guided me before, and I knew I had to listen to it again. Although going to the library was the last thing on my mind, I knew that I could trust its guidance. As I approached the library with a degree of reticence, I said, "Now where? I really do not have time for a goose chase." The gentle voice replied, "Go to the reference section." Looking at the rows of books in the reference section, I said again, "Now where?" I felt frustrated, but my left hand began to twitch, a signal that my hand was picking up an energy, a signal I had learned to trust as I honed my skills at psychometry. I followed the twitching like someone holding a metal detector, and it led me to a book, the Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church. Next, I placed both hands on the book and I asked it to show me whatever I was being guided to see. Opening the book to a page, I was amazed by what I saw. Marco Antonio de Dominius, not just his name and a brief description, but also a drawing of him, and the story of his illustrious and infamous biography. As I had suspected, he lived and died during the time of the Inquisition. Now I understood my anger during the funeral, and when I was in philosophy class in college and the professor said that the Pope was considered infallible. It made sense why I felt uncomfortable with my devout Catholic and Episcopalian friends and disliked the rituals practiced in those churches. Most of all, I now knew why I was afraid to talk openly about my explorations about reincarnation. When I knew more about past life regression therapy, I thought of Marco Antonio de Dominius not only as a past life, but also as a past life regression client. I held the energy for him to forgive himself for his arrogance and stubbornness, as well as to forgive others for their errors. To come from unconditional love as he believed Jesus did. It was a process that happened slowly for him. I could tell that he had to ruminate on those thoughts, but I assured him that there was no judgment, and for him to take his time to do what he could do. I knew that my part in this life was to learn the lesson of how I express myself and my truth. In 1996, the universe gave me a test to be sure that I got the lesson when I had to go to court because a former employer did not pay commissions that he owed me when I left the job. What I thought was a simple dispute about payment of monies turned out to be something so much more when he had his attorney accuse me of being crazy because I believed in reincarnation. He said that I was fired. I was not only shocked, but his statement triggered a panic attack. I had learned a breathing technique to help me with panic attacks, so I sat in my chair and began progressive relaxation from my toes to my neck while I listened to the accusations. The judge turned to me, but I was only halfway through the process. The hush in the room was palpable, but I knew I needed to complete the process before I spoke up. I had not anticipated this turn of events. I said a silent prayer. In me, as me, through me. Divine love, guide me in this moment to speak my truth clearly. Finally, I felt the tension in my body lessen, and I stood up. My knees were knocking, and my voice was shaking as I replied, Your Honor, I gave my resignation in October, but I stayed until January to complete a job I was working on. I paused because I knew that the next words were the reason I was there. I took a deep breath, and I felt a calm that I had not felt all morning. Your Honor, I feel whether I believe in reincarnation has nothing to do with this case. However, not only do I believe in reincarnation, but I am also a past life regression therapist. This time my voice was steady, and I had a sense that I had won, not the case at hand, but something greater, because I spoke my truth gently and without prejudice. Indeed,
I lost the case for lack of evidence, but I was no longer afraid to speak about my growing belief in reincarnation. I knew that something had changed because the next time I saw my former employer in public, he moved away when I greeted him, and he quickly left the room. I have observed how some lessons take longer to let go of completely. I reasoned that they would be healed and transformed with time and love. I saw the repetition of lessons, albeit in different circumstances, from one lifetime to another, building up to a crescendo of energy. So it made sense to me that the energies of an issue would go in the other direction until they disappeared, making the way clear for other lessons, even good ones. I sensed that the lesson about speaking my truth was now a non-issue because the issue was healed through remembering Marco Antonio and then applying the lesson in my current life in the courtroom scene. Then something quite miraculous happened. I received an unexpected inheritance that was more than double the amount of the commissions I was owed. Was it a coincidence, or was it a synchronicity to confirm that the lesson was learned? What I know is, since that event, I have been more open with sharing my beliefs, while at the same time I am clear to say, this is my belief, and whether you agree with it or not, well, that's your truth. I have no need to convince anyone about reincarnation, but rather I have a sense that every person will discover their truth in their own way in divine order. As Marianne Williamson said, it is like we are at the train station. We are all headed in the same direction, but we take different trains at different times. For over 20 years, memories of Marco Antonio came up. As we got to know one another, the memories changed. In the beginning, I saw that Marco Antonio hung around and observed the conclusion of his trial, frantically waving his arms in the air and pacing back and forth. Marco Antonio said, "How could they? I died during the trial, and they buried me according to my status. Now they are disinterring and burning my body along with my books. How dare they?" He was furious. He cursed the church fathers for what they did. "You'll pay for this. Some day you will pay for this, and I hope I will be there when you do." Little did he know that his angry curse tied him to those people he despised and bound them to return, to re-encounter one another again until he remembered how to love. One day when I felt his anger, I tried to appeal to his scientific mind. "Marco Antonio, don't you see that we all have as many lives as it takes to perfect our experience on earth? Compare that journey to the experiments of light and spatial relationships. It's a process, an exploration, an adventure. Do you see it? Some experiments work and others do not, but there's no judgment." Memories of Marco Antonio's life bled over into my life, which led to conversations with him like the ones I had with my dad's spirit. I felt as if he longed for someone to talk to bare his soul, so I listened. I said to him, "Your past is catching up with you. I sense that souls who you mistreated and spoke harshly to are now returning and feel your energy through me. However, they do not understand the bleed over process. I believe there is still some unfinished business, and that it is time for you to forgive yourself and hold the energy of love for those you mistreated. Be honest with yourself, Marco. You did not fully understand what you found, and you ignored the consciousness of the time. You need to make things right. After years of observing Marco, I sensed that he needed to make others wrong to feel good about himself because he was insecure and felt less than others. He reminded me of someone I knew who had Asperger's, who was highly functional, who fixated on a topic and expected others to condone his fixations because he was a genius. I continued, Marco, on a psychic level, I believe you need to reach out to all those beings who you were harsh, mean, or arrogant with at times. I believe it is time to ask for forgiveness, but that's up to you. I sense that he listened quietly because he trusts me to be honest with him, and yet non-judgmental at the same time. Marco, think about how you would feel if you were constantly berated. I was by my father, and I became like him. I see that now. I loathed him, but look at me, just like him, and I did not even see it. No wonder they hate me. He paused, and I could feel his thoughts bouncing around in his head. I resonated with the works of Father Origen, but now I realize how incomplete his and my understanding was. I need time to reflect. Take whatever time you need, I said. I believe your father did not know how to handle your genius. I hope you find it in your heart to forgive him. Ultimately, it was always your choice of becoming like your father or not. However, when you take the time to heal your wound, you will also heal the relationship with others. They go hand in hand. In your time, and even though you were a church figure, man did not always treat one another with compassion. I believe it comes up now to heal these energies that do not serve the highest good of mankind. This is an opportunity to evolve individually and collectively. I could not believe I was talking this way to an archbishop, but I continued nevertheless. This is one of the reasons why I am speaking to you in the way that I am. I look at you as a separate entity accountable for your actions. We have a unique connection, but at the same time, we both have free will. As for me, in this reality, as I examine my behavior, I must own my choices. It's a lot to take in. But I asked for truth and understanding, he said. Eventually, he showed me that he wanted to do things differently. I asked him to think back before things went awry and to imagine what it would be like if he had made other choices. In the non-physical world, thoughts create one's reality instantly. As he imagined one choice versus another choice, it was as if he stepped into a virtual reality and the new scene played out around him. He could choose to play his character in the scene, or he could observe as if floating above the scene. In the end, he chose to rewrite the final scene before his death, as told in the story above. Instead of being angry with everyone else, he decided to do what he could to make amends to people he had harmed by his words and his actions. That was his choice, and I honored it. By some standards, it might seem like a small action, but I could see what a profound effect it had on him, and I also felt a change in my life. Even though I still do not care about the rituals of the Catholic and Episcopal churches, I decided to do what I feel comfortable with and yet honor another person's love of ceremonies and rituals. In a life between life memory, I saw that Marco Antonio's life choice was a continuation of James, the brother of Jesus, where James was unresolved about how Peter and Paul changed Jesus' teachings. Marco Antonio was part of the very organization that began in Rome, where James personally leaned toward serving his brother's cause, being a mediator, and yet full of self-doubt. Marco Antonio's personality was self-serving, demanding, and calculating. Opposites, extreme opposites. How is this possible? Marco Antonio wondered. However, when witnessed from a soul's perspective without judgment, but with the understanding of the challenge of experiencing opposites, I sensed an aha moment ripple through the time-space continuum. Marco Antonio began to sense, although he did not know how this happened, more about the contrast between him and James. Another day when Marco was calmer, I saw that he and James had something in common. I believe it was James's desire to unite the people that motivated Marco to try to unite the churches. Where James felt that he lacked the power to unite people, Marco's use of power did not serve him or the people he wanted to help. Even though they shared a common cause, their personalities were so different that it made the contrast between them glaringly obvious. I felt I not only understood James and Marco Antonio better, but I also understood myself more clearly. I felt more pieces of my cosmic puzzle click into place, like the last move of a Rubik's Cube, when all the colors on all sides perfectly matched.